Again, our in-house media crew taking care of that. Aren't they good? Every time I feel like I say, no, this is my favorite one. And so it's fun to be in a place where lots of talented people. And someone asked me this morning, a first-time guest asked me after the 9:30 service, they wanted a quick answer to why did we choose to move to San Francisco to start this particular church. And really there were two primary reasons. One, there didn't seem to be a significant number of people here that love Jesus, but there seemed to be an amazing amount of influence opportunity here. And so we thought, what if we marry those two things together? What could happen in this city and in the world ultimately? So that's the short of what we're doing here. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Yes? And it feels like it. Now, you guys know, those of you who have been around, you know your pastor really enjoys something in the low 60s or anywhere between low 50s and low 60s. That's what I call my happy place, okay? Temperature, Fahrenheit, all right? Some of you, if you want it warmer, turn the heat on, do something. But when it's Christmas time, I like it like this. Anybody else just having fun out there? And of course, this is where the arrogant East Coasters are like, this isn't cold. That's right. It's cold for here, though, and it's just fine. I had to scrape the ice off the windshield to go get donuts with my 8-year-old this morning. So, because when donuts are on the line, you do whatever it takes to get. That's a true story. Almost missed the BART, but I was not going to miss the chocolate twist. So, listen, I got a long morning ahead of me. When it's early in the morning, I gotta have sustenance, and I know that I could have granola or other things, but secret seems to be the chocolate twist. Hey, it is the most wonderful time of the year, and here's what's crazy. Christmas really changes everything. There are things that happen at Christmas that don't happen any other time of the year. True? Let me give you just a few. We change the music that we listen to during the Christmas season. Anybody not like Christmas music? Just looking for enemies? No big deal. I would be embarrassed to tell you how early in the year Shauna and I began listening to Christmas music. We kind of have deadlines, and no, I will not give you what those are. Seriously, you would think... sinful thoughts about your pastor. We have one deadline that's when we can do instrumental Christmas music, truthfully. And I'm not a huge fan of his in the normal world, but Kenny G Christmas holiday stuff, pretty good. Especially if you like sleeping to those sort of things. And then we have another date whereby we can bring lyrics into the mix. Anyway, that's just us. I know you don't have any quirky things in your life, but that's just us. Second thing that you do differently, you put things inside and outside of your home that you don't do at any other time of year. Right? What's the strangest thing you bring out at Christmas time that's unlike you the rest of the year? Everybody's like, I don't know. I gave them one chance to talk, God. They're going to have to listen the rest of the time this morning. Another thing that we do, so we do with decorations, people that don't want any decorations, they're doing things with lights and just strange things. And how many of you are white light people? Like just white lights, that's the way to go. How many of you like the colored? How do you like the big colored bulbs? Anybody? Yes, not surprised. I'm a fan of those or white. If it's small, if the lights are small, I don't want them blinking. It's just a little bit too strange for me. White lights, bless you. But I like the big color ones. And when it comes to food, we eat things during Christmas time that we don't eat ever. And some things we shouldn't even eat during Christmas season. Now, there are a few things out there that shouldn't just be around for Christmas. They should be around for 12 months, such as the peppermint bark from Williams-Sonoma. Now, I know you want to make it a niche, limited time thing, so all of us flock to that. But this kid would eat it 12 months a year. All right, just sell it to me. But there are other things that you only eat during Christmas season, and you shouldn't even eat during Christmas season. But you don't eat them any other time of the year. And I have this deep conviction that if it was really tasty stuff, you would find a way to eat it between January and November. Like, who's had a fruitcake in March? Anybody? Anyone? Cranberry sauce in April? I don't think so. I mean, listen, we do things at Christmas time that don't happen any other time of the year. You actually act like you like all of your family members during Christmas. Now, I'm going to give you a tip that's free. This isn't from the Bible, but it's true, and you just need to know. You can fake liking everyone in your family for up to 2 days. But after 48 hours, so those of you that have trips planned, just know this. If you have more than 48 hours planned with the person you like, you actually have to change your heart. You can't fake it. All right? And so if you have more than 2 days coming with someone that's just strange, and we all have strange families in some way, okay? Even you need to have a change of heart or just get out of Dodge quickly. You can fake it for a while. And then movies. We watch movies we don't watch any other time of year. And I'm going to tell you in a moment what the best Christmas movie is, but I want to hear your favorite first. So just your opinions that are wrong probably. But on 3, tell me what your favorite Christmas movie is. 1, 2, 3. Listen, how many of you said Elf? Not true. It's not right. How many of you said even Christmas Vacation? Christmas Story? It's a Wonderful Life. That's way up there. But my favorite, this is part of kind of where I grew up, but it's nostalgic for me, but I do think it's the best, Home Alone. Anybody with me? Yeah. We should just do a Home Alone party sometime. I can quote the whole thing, and I am that guy in that particular movie. And just in case some of you are asking the question in your mind right now, which Home Alone is he referencing? Let me tell you a few things that you need to know if you don't know. Home Alone 3, it's not even part of the family. It is terrible. Home Alone 2, pretty good, but the original is the way to go. And so I did that with my siblings once that movie came out. So I remember seeing it at the theater, and then we began watching it every Christmas. We do it with our kids now, and so it's a lot of fun. Christmas changes everything. And for those of us, and I know it's not all of us, but for those of us who claim to follow Jesus, we know that the reality of Christmas does change absolutely everything. And if that isn't a huge moment of celebration, and maybe you're not a person of faith, or you're not sure you even believe this is possible, I want to introduce you as we kick off this Christmas series called Light. I want to introduce you to why you and I should just be astounded by the Christmas story. I want to introduce you. Let me give you a verse that, even if you're not a person of faith, maybe you've heard associated with Christmas, and rightfully so. Here it is from Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. It says this, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." I love what the prophet Isaiah is saying there. He's saying this is happening to us. This is not just, and remember, he's talking about the people of God, the nation of Israel at the time, but it's certainly including those of us who would be adopted into the family of God. He's saying to us, this child is going to be given from the heart of God into our world. It's going to make a difference. Here's who he's going to be to us. He's going to be our wonderful counselor, the mighty God, and everlasting Father, and the ultimate Prince of Peace. This is going to change everything. This is going to change everything, but just not yet for them. Do you have any idea how much time elapses between when Isaiah says this from God to God's people and they actually experience this? Any idea how much time goes by between this and when it actually takes place? About 700 years. Now, I know you guys love waiting as much as me, right? I mean, we don't want to wait. We do not want to wait at all. I mean, an extra 10 minutes waiting in traffic, who wants that? No one. Amazon says you can have free shipping if you wait 3 days. We say, we don't want free shipping. We want it tomorrow. So hook us up. We hate waiting. There are a few things, especially in my current experience with a certain situation in my life, I'm discovering there are a few things as difficult as waiting. There's nothing that I know of that brings a sense of helplessness and hopelessness like waiting, especially when you're not sure if it even will happen, even eventually. Nothing like waiting. Yet sometimes for me and for you in our lives and for the people of God that Isaiah spoke to around 700 BC, sometimes all you can do is wait. And they waited and waited. You can imagine they went from hope to hopelessness. Probably generations would pass by during those 700 years where they would just think, there's no way. I can't believe our ancestors believed that. That's crazy. But eventually it did happen. Eventually what had been prophesied by Isaiah, it came to bear. The time came and this moment took place. Everything that they had been looking forward to, eventually it shows up. Eventually it shows up. And here's how Paul, when he would write in the first century to the Galatians, here's what he said about this moment of Isaiah's prophecy becoming reality. He said it in Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. He says, but when the fullness of time had come, at just the right moment, when what God had been looking forward to in the cosmos for ever and ever and ever, when the moment came, but when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born under the woman, born of woman, born under the law. And if you kept reading, you would see how the reason he came into being at Christmas was so that he might redeem those who are under the law. When the fullness of time had come. And the question, of course, for me is, God, what made this time the time? Why now? Like, what were you waiting on? And I would love to give you an answer this morning. I don't know. I just know this. In God's divine wisdom, in his knowledge, he knew that it's game time at this point in history. He knows how things are unfolding. And remember, before he ever created anything, he had this plan from the very beginning of time that he would send forth his Son, who would be born of a virgin woman and would be born under the law so that he might redeem. You saw what Isaiah said about him. The government would be upon his shoulder. He would be this new king, and everything would be under his authority, and he would be the wonderful counselor. He would be mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And Paul says, looking back to his readers in Galatia, he says to them, when the fullness of time had come. Imagine what the anticipation must have been like for all of the people that were involved in this moment. What was the anticipation like for God? He knows from the beginning of time, there's going to come this moment in history where he's going to say to his Son, it's time to go accomplish the mission. Imagine what the anticipation must have been like for Jesus the Son. There's this moment coming where the Father's going to say to me, the time is now. And he's going to send me, and I'm going to accomplish something. This is the reason I'm going. I'm going to bring many sons and daughters back to my Father. And then imagine the people that Isaiah had spoken to and people who had read this on the scrolls for 700 years. The anticipation, they're waiting for this because they've been sitting in darkness, as we'll see in a second, and in a moment, the light comes on. In a way that history has never known, Jesus shows up, and he shows up among people. Now, what I want you to do over the next couple of weeks, we've got 17 days till Christmas. Everybody got their shopping done? You guys, 17 days, okay? Just keep that in mind. 17 days. I want you to spend a little bit of time each day, if you're willing to, or some days, most days, in Matthew chapters 1 and 2 and in Luke chapters 1 and 2. These are the places in the Scripture that give us the significant events that took place around the birth of Jesus. So I simply want to encourage you, there's 4 chapters there, and you'll really get the holistic Christmas part. If you really want extra credit, those of you that like the extra credit, go back to the Old Testament, look at some of those prophecies, you can find that. But I want to encourage you to look at that. It just records those 2 writers, Matthew and Luke, they record the significant events surrounding the whole reality of Christmas. But that's not, we're not going to look at either one of those letters for our series this Christmas. I want to look at what John had to say. While Matthew and Luke give us the significant events around Christmas, John gives us the significance of the why and the what of Christmas. Okay, so if you have a Bible, turn to John chapter 1. If you need one, just lift a hand up. And we'll place one into your hands. John chapter 1, John's one of the, when the New Testament begins, you've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then John. And what I want to do over these 3 weeks, for those of you that like to read ahead, we're just going to be all 3 weeks in John chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. Those of you receiving a Bible, I want to encourage you over the next 17 days or so to look at Matthew chapters 1 and 2 and Luke chapters 1 and 2, just refamiliarize yourself, or maybe just familiarize yourself with all that was going on in this moment. Would you all stand with me? Page 576, if you have one of the Bibles that we use here at Epic. I'm glad you guys are here this morning. Excited about what God's up to in our church, excited about this time of year, and I hope that God will speak to us right here as we read this and learn together. Here's what John writes. This is John, one of the 12 disciples, known as the disciple whom Jesus loved. He says this, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John." This is John the Baptist. "He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light," that's John the Baptist, "but he came to bear witness about the light." That's Jesus. You may be seated. So again, the guy writing this, he's one of the 12 disciples or apostles. He is also, so he's one of the 12, but he's also one of the kind of inner three with Peter, James, and then this John. But if you had to say, then when Jesus narrowed it down from the 12 to the 3 and then from the 3 to the 1, who was that one? Now, I don't know that Jesus would answer the question the way we're going to say it, but John became known especially as the disciple whom Jesus loved. Not a bad distinction, right? Hopefully it didn't lead to arrogance for him. But he became known as the disciple whom Jesus loved. He was intimately acquainted with the life of Jesus. And the way as he looks back, the way that he writes his letter, he starts way back at the very beginning. He doesn't start with the life of Jesus. He starts way before then. What does he say? What are the very first 3 words that he writes to start his letter, at least in the English translation? What does he say? In the beginning. Does that sound familiar to any other book in the Bible that you're aware of? Even if you're not a Bible person? This is the way the whole Bible begins, doesn't it? Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God made the heavens and the earth. And what John is doing is he's looking way back, because what we typically do, in Matthew and Luke, they're going to give you genealogy and things like that, but then they're going to start with Jesus' earthly existence, which is awesome. The great thing about the 4 gospel writers is we see 4 different perspectives that include much of the same stuff. And what John does, he looks way back, not just at the birth of Jesus, he goes way back beyond that, and he looks at the very beginning of time, and he says, in the beginning. And then he starts using this title, the Word. The Word. In the Greek, this word is the Logos. In English, it's translated as the Word. And what he's saying, the reason he's giving this title to Jesus is he's saying Jesus is, and you'll see this in the coming weeks, I hope, Jesus is the divine self-expression of God. Jesus is God expressing himself. What you'll see in a couple of weeks is the idea that God fully discloses himself in the person of Jesus. And so John, looking back, he's saying the Word, he's saying is Jesus. And Jesus, he says 3 things about him just in verse 1. That Jesus was what? In the beginning. In the beginning, Jesus was with God. And then this huge one, in the beginning, and right now, and in the future, Jesus is God. Anyone confused yet? Jesus was in the beginning. Jesus was with God. Jesus was God. That's what he says about him. And he says that in verse 2, he just reiterates himself, so we're not confused. He says that Jesus was in the beginning with God, essentially what he told us partly in verse 1. And then he says something astounding in verse 3. He says, all things were made through him, that's through Jesus, and without Jesus was not anything made that was made. He's saying that it wasn't just God the Father at the creation party, that Jesus was there, and that everything that has ever come into existence, that Jesus touched it and created it or spoke it and made it. He was there, and that there's nothing in existence that Jesus didn't make. Quite a statement. And if you keep going into the Christmas reality of what this means for us, here are a couple of things that it means, just to perplex us more. It means that the earthly body, Mary's earthly body, that Jesus would enter the earthly world through, he actually created it. And the earthly father he would have, Joseph, he created him too. Now, where it can get really confusing, and we won't discuss this, but I just want to throw it out there, it's also got to mean somehow that he created his own earthly body. Kind of what you like doing on the Wii. Right? Kids are like, Dad, let's create you. Jesus really, he did. That's kind of what he did. And so, again, I can go far beyond all of our minds. But that's what the text is saying. And then if you were to read some of Paul's writings to the Colossians, what Paul would say, not only was everything made by Jesus, but it was also made for Jesus. It was made by him and yet for him. So when we talk from the stage like this and tell you have purpose, the reason you have purpose is because Jesus created you, and he created you for himself and with intent behind you. Crazy, right? So John goes along and he says in verse 4 that in him was life. And you see this idea of life all throughout the scriptures, just like this idea of light that we're talking about in this series. This idea of life, Jesus would say things like, I am the resurrection and the life. He would say that I have come that you might have life and have life abundantly. We know that Jesus is, every time he enters a scene, Jesus is bringing life to the situation. That's what Christmas is about. Not him coming to life, him being life. Now what's very interesting is that we celebrate at Christmas time the coming of Jesus. Some of you have heard, and many of you maybe even celebrate, the idea of Advent. What Advent means, it's borrowing from this Latin term, which simply means the coming of something very important that's long awaited. But when you have the nativity scenes around your home, if you have that, or your parents have that, or whatever the case may be, there's the baby Jesus there, and he's in the manger, whatever that is, and what it seems like is, wow, this is Jesus coming into existence. Well, sort of, right? He is coming into his human existence, but what John tells us is that this one who we're going to study as the light, he's always been. He's not coming into existence. In human form, yes, but not into existence, period. Interesting. Here's what verse 5 says, and perhaps verse 5 is our hinge point, or the hinge verse for this morning. It says this, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. In order for light to affect darkness, it's got to touch it. Don't miss this. In order for light to affect darkness, it must touch it. And in order for light to overcome darkness, it must have contact with the darkness. This is the whole idea behind the incarnation of Jesus. To be incarnate, or to incarnate, literally, as we'll see in a couple weeks, literally what that definition means is to put on meat. And so what we're learning from John here is that God's divine self-expression is Jesus, so he's going to put meat, he's going to put human flesh onto Jesus so that he can come and dwell among us, as we'll see in just a couple of weeks. And the only way that light can affect darkness is to make contact with the darkness. Here's an example. If all the lights in this building were off and someone flipped the light switch back there, light would affect the darkness that used to be in this room. Right? But if all the lights in this building are off and you turn the light on in here, the light in here would have no bearing or effect on the light up in our office area. Why? Because if light doesn't make contact with darkness, it has no effect on darkness. So when you and I get excited at Christmas about this idea of Emmanuel, God with us, it's not just some cute idea. It's not that Jesus was bored with heaven, so he came to check out our earth, okay? He had a pretty good thing going on there, I believe. The idea is that in order for our darkness to be affected, Jesus had to make contact with it. In order for you and I to get to light, Jesus had to step into our darkness. This is the whole idea. This is what Christmas is. The reason Emmanuel, God comes to be with us, yes, to relate to us, but he steps into our darkness so that we might one day step into his light. You'll see that more in just a second, I hope. A couple of things Jesus said about himself in further chapters in John. In John chapter 8, verse 12, here's what Jesus said. Maybe it's familiar to you. John chapter 8, verse 12. I think you'll have it on the screen. Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness. In chapter 12, verse 46, again in this letter from John, John records Jesus saying this, I have come into the world. Here's the idea of the whole Christmas reality. Emmanuel, God with us, incarnation. I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. So Jesus understands something. The way God set it up was that the only way that we could escape our darkness is if Jesus came to make contact with our darkness. The only way we would touch and taste the light of the world, Jesus himself, was if he came and made contact with the darkness of our sin that we find ourselves in. And what he fully does, right, isn't becoming a baby in a manger. The idea is that the baby in a manger starts out this way because ultimately he's going to become a grown man who's going to be accused of things that he actually hasn't done. He's going to be innocent, but going to be tried as a criminal. But on the cross, what Jesus knew, his ultimate mission, why he came, why God dreamt this up, why the fullness of time had come, the whole point behind it is that he would hang on a cross and enter into our darkness in a way that's hard to fathom. What Paul would tell the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, he would say this, but God made him, Jesus, to be sin, although he knew no sin. Jesus was innocent, he was pure, he was holy, he was sinless. Yet on the cross, he takes on our sin. He takes on the darkest of our sin, all of our sin, the thing that you would be embarrassed for me to know about and the thing that I would be embarrassed for you to know about. The addiction that you can't set down, the habit that just keeps recurring even though you make promises to God and other people in your life, the darkest part in you, that's what the cross is about. Jesus fully entering into the darkness of the nasty stuff that you don't want your best friend to know about that comes out of your mind, heart, and your actions. That's what Jesus is going to the cross for. He's tasting your deepest darkness so that you might taste his greatest light. Light has come. It's made contact with the darkness. Well, the question, of course, is who is this really for, Ben? Is it just for a few elite people? Is it just for some exclusive club? Is it just for religious people? Ben, is this just for people who don't need a million second chances? I hope not. I hope not. I want to show you 3 places of things we just read where you can see who this is for. Chapter 1, verse 7, if we could get that back up. Chapter 1, verse 7, when he was talking about John the Baptist, here's what he said. He said that John the Baptist came as a witness to bear witness about Jesus. Remember, John the Baptist shows up in the first century. He's saying, make way, repent, and be baptized. There's one coming who's more worthy than anyone who's ever lived. John did that so that who might believe in him? Not just the 3 people that are saying something right now, right? He did this so that all, no matter their past, no matter their pedigree, no matter the nation they came from, no matter their deepest, darkest sins, so that all might believe through him. John chapter 8, verse 12, let's see what the condition is for who can do it here. When Jesus speaks, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Who can follow me and not walk in darkness? Come on. I need some enthusiasm in the room. Whoever. What does he say in 12:46? I've come into the world as light so that who can believe and may not remain in darkness? Whoever. Ben, what are the conditions? Just to be an all or a whoever? But there actually are a couple of conditions. There are conditions in these statements, right? What did it say in John 8:12? Whoever follows. In 12:46, whoever believes. So as we'll see next week, it's not, in fact, that somehow we are all God's children in regards to our relationship with him. That isn't true for the universe. Yes, we were all created by God, but we're not all God's children in that way. We'll see that next week. But everyone can be. Jesus entered into our darkness for every whoever has been. Whoever. He tasted your darkness so that you might taste the light of Christ himself. But as we said a moment ago, this isn't a guarantee for every person in this room. I would be crazy to believe that every one of us will get out of the darkness of our sin, our addiction, our habits, our despair, our depression. No way. But that can be true. Some of you have been hanging out in this community for a while, and I love that, but you've also been putting off this massive, eternal, and eternity-shaping decision, which is to step into the light of Christ himself. Don't make his attempts at Christmas in vain. Don't let it be in vain. The reason that Jesus leaves heaven, absorbs all of our sin, don't let that be in vain. Let there be purpose behind that. And he stepped into your dark. You don't have to wonder, but Ben, what about my darkness? It's so dark. It's so deep. It's so shameful. It's so embarrassing. That's the point. If you could pick yourselves up by your boots and take care of things by yourself, he would have never headed this way. But you can't, and I can't, and we can't. Don't delay anymore. In addition to that, we're going to have our last baptism of the year next week on the 15th. And so if you have been delaying that, just to identify with Jesus because you know you have faith in him. But for those of you who are yet without faith, I just want to say, Christmas is about this. It's about Jesus making contact with your darkness so that you might make contact with the light of Christ himself. It's for all. It's for whoever. I mean, he shows us this, right? You would expect, I've been listening to a song that's an older song at Christmas time, but I just love the meaning. The song is called, it's just such a strange way to save the world. He uses such strange circumstances and seemingly strange people who are not well known, and he's showing up and calling his hometown a place that no one really thought much of. I think what he's doing there is just demonstrating that this whoever thing is really serious. It's really about whoever and whatever. And it doesn't matter what your pedigree is or your background or your wealth or lack of wealth. It doesn't matter if you've been a part of a church or you practice religion. It doesn't matter. It's for whoever would step in and go, I want that, Jesus. I'm willing to look away from my sin and all the things that I put before you and look to you because only you can give my heart what it desperately needs. We have a value here at Epic, and it's this, that because of the grace of Jesus Christ, our past doesn't have to dictate our future. But as often as I say that, what I know in my heart and what drives me on to urgency and what led us to plant this church here is I know that some people will choose to remain in darkness. And as your pastor, whether we've never met or we know each other very well, I want to plead with you, don't stay there. And I also want to plead with those of you who've tried to fool yourselves into thinking you're part of this, but it's made no difference in your life. Don't stay there. Pretending doesn't help you here or in the future. Is Jesus enough? Is Jesus enough? He came for all the whoever's. And with that in mind, I just want to remind you that this is the reason we started this church. This is the reason Shauna and I picked up a little 2-year-old, 4-year-old, and 6-year-old all boys and said, hey guys, you don't have a vote because there's more of you than there are of us. Sorry, no democracy here. We're going 2,000 miles. We're going to San Francisco. We're going to give our lives to that city. We're going to invite a bunch of other people to join in with us. And as you've seen the posters perhaps in the lobby this morning and on the back of the door, friends, it's time to create some more space for the whoever's. Let me tell you why we need to create some more space. Let me show you, for those of you that love data. Anybody love data? Some of you just need to fill it. Look around, you can fill it, but here's the data. When it comes to the whoever's of our city, the reason that we can't continue to stay in 2 services is because basically what experts say is when you get to the 80% capacity, and by the way, this room, there's no fire marshals in here. Awesome. The legal maximum occupancy is 200. We have about 24 more seats than that in the room right now, but I mean, those on the back don't count. Since July, our 11 o'clock service has been over 90% of capacity of that 200 mark, occasionally hitting 100%. And even in the last month, the 9:30 service, which continues to grow, it averaged 79% in November. And friends, when we look at just our trajectories of growth that happens from the fall till January and February, if we just get the normal growth, nothing exceptional, if we just get the normal growth that we have every single year, we're already out of space, which means less whoever's can enter in, right? And that's just not good enough. Not good enough, is it? While the floor may be somewhat comfortable, it's not good enough. And so here's the solution. Here's where we're headed. Beginning January 26th, 7 weeks from today, we will begin to have 3 Sunday morning services starting at 9:15, 10:30, and 11:45. And so that's what this room will look like for those 3 times. And here's what is happening in Epic Kids at the same time for those of you that work in that area, those of you who have kids, or all of you, some of you at least, will have kids later on. So here's what you need to know. At 9:15, birth to 5th grade is what we will offer. So those 3 different age groups. At 10:30, the full gamut of birth all the way through middle school. That group we just started this fall. And then at 11:45, at least to begin with, we'll have birth through 5-year-olds at 11:45. And if we need to add more classes at any of those hours, as we've done in the past, we will do that. So we're adding 50% more weekly worship gatherings. We're adding 50% more kids classes. We have 6 kids classes now. We're going to 9. And so you probably know that means something for you, right? Just ask me really loud together. Ben, what does that mean for us? Come on. So glad you asked. Here's what it means for you. I'm going to ask you today, I'm going to ask you to do a lot of things. Part of the DNA of our church is that since the very beginning, people have done whatever it took to see God carry out the vision of this church. So long before some of you don't even know, we started out at a hotel, and when we started out of the hotel, we had a team of 10 to 15 people who would show up every morning to unpack a trailer and van. I'm not asking you to do that, okay? But here's what I am asking you to do. Here are the three things. The first one I'm asking you to do is just a shift. Obviously, no one can attend the 9:30 or 11 o'clock service anymore because there are no more 9:30 and 11 o'clock services. However, I'm letting you off the hook, I feel like, which I hate to do. Even the greatest shift that's going to be made is just from 11 a.m. to 11:45 a.m., okay? And if you're wondering, Ben, since I get here at 11:28 every Sunday, which service should I go to? You're going to be early for the 11:45. It's going to be awesome. But some of you will go to 10:30, some of you go to 11:45, which is great. So it's a huge shift starting with our staff. It means the band gets here earlier every Sunday morning now. It means that all of us on staff stay an hour and a half later. It means there's more strain on my voice. There's more strain on Brad's voice. There's a lot of things that have to happen. There are baseball games of my own kids that I will miss, and unfortunately some Niner games in the future that I'll have to miss. However, you're worth it. Right? The whoever's are worth it to us. And so we do want you to shift. Secondly, we probably need somewhere from 80 to 100 new volunteers. New volunteers. There's about 228 volunteers on kind of our current roster, and we need to increase that, especially in our Epic Kids division and in our hospitality area. Now, really, the worship arts, you'll see this on a card in a second, the worship arts team, it's really the only team where you really need to have some skill to start with to get up there. But they can work with a lot of people. It's American Idol-like at times. But every other area, this is true, every other area, you don't necessarily have to have a skill to begin serving in. Okay, Tim can take a Grinch and make them a nice greeter. If you hate kids, probably don't want to go that route, all right? Probably we don't want you there and you don't want to be there, but there are some great areas. The tech team, you can be very fluent in technology. You don't have to know anything, though. They're going to need to grow their team because we're adding a whole new service. So that's 52 services a year, if you want to think of it like that, that we have to actually staff, hospitality, kids, all of those things. And so here's what's going to happen. In a moment, I'm going to pray. The band's going to come up, lead us in a couple of songs, and I want you to let us know that you're in this thing with us. Okay? I want you to let us know that you're in this with us. Now, some of you, when you see these cards, you already know the times. Let's go ahead and pass those cards out just so they can be acquainted with those cards. Now, I realize some of you may need to have conversations with significant others or friends, but we want to create kind of this tangible response moment this morning where we're just seeing our church collectively say, hey, we're willing to do what it takes to reach more whoever's. Okay? We're willing to do what it takes. And the third thing that I didn't mention fully is not only do you need to shift and start serving, but now you can invite all of the whoever's in your life. Okay, there's space for them now. Whoever lives near you, whoever works down the hall, whoever's a family member in the Bay Area, whoever you run into at the gym, if you do that, whoever. Okay, so shift, serve, and invite. And listen, make your best guess. Even if you don't know absolutely for sure, make your best guess. And here's what I want to happen. I'm going to pray. We'll stand as I pray. And I want you there's a couple of songs, so we have time, but there's a bowl right up here at the front. There's one at the back. And even if you're just telling us which service you want to go to, or you're praying about volunteering, or you're not for sure, would you just mark what you think you're likely to be willing to do and go ahead and just drop it in the bowl? It doesn't commit you to a specific date, but it just says to all of us in this room, hey, we're in this thing together. And we're willing to serve, and we're willing to shift, and we're willing to invite. And there's also a bowl in the back. Just look back that way on the table. If you're towards the back, just place it in there. So let's pray, and then let's make our commitments, and let's ask God to do some great things.